I must have put something on my face just now that I'm a little bit allergic to because there's just a waterfall coming out of my nose and my eyeballs and I don't know why. So let's go. Where do I even begin? Oh my gosh, you guys, it's been a little bit since I've done a book review. It's been too long, obviously, way too long. And then the longer it goes, the more you're like, wow, we'll just lump it in next month. And then suddenly you have too many books to review and you're like,
I don't think I should do this at all.
And then you kind of want to throw your camera away. That's not what we're gonna do though. We're gonna review the books because that's what we do. For those of you that don't know, I created my own little scale that I rate all my books on, and it's a 10-point system, which are plot, characters, setting, writing style, pacing, themes, originality, emotional impact, overall enjoyment, and then the ending. So I give a point to every single category, or I assign however many points I think that category exists out of 1 point. That's what you get what I'm trying to say. Either it's a full point or not, but it can only go up to a point. This does not need to be explained this deeply. Add them all up, and then out of 10, that is the rating I give the book. And then sometimes a book just feels like a 10. Your heart wants it to be a 10, so it's gonna be a 10. And that's, I make the rules, so I get to break them. And then within that rating scale, I also have my own spicy scale. It's pretty similar to a lot of spicy scales, like in terms of romance novel spice that you see on the internet, but it's gonna be a little bit different only because I like to make it very clear cut in terms of what is a 3, what's a 4, what's a 5, and all of that. So if a book doesn't have any spice at all, or that's just not applicable, then there's not gonna be a spice rating. The more romance novels I read, the spicier they are getting because my tolerance for them is kind of ratcheting up a little bit, like little by little. So I will not lie to you. I am reading books right now that in a million years I could have never imagined I would be reading. And I love that for me. It's very exciting. I'm having a good time. And yeah, I think that my comfortability with sexuality in general has just really evolved reading these books. And I think it's really fun. That's what your 30s are all about, my friends. Yeah, so let's just get into it. Lovelight Farms series by B.K. Borison. I don't even know what to say right now about this. I do know what to say. I have a lot to say actually, but B.K. Borison, you have quickly become one of my favorite authors, and I am so honored to exist in the same world as you and the same time where you have put out this series. This is the Lovelight Farms series. I accidentally bought book 4. Then after I read it, I found out it was book 4, and I'm like, of course, that happens every single time. When I realized I loved it, I went online and bought all of them. I don't know if I've ever started a book on book 1. I think ACOTAR is like the only book I've ever started on book 1, which is a whole other conversation that we will be getting to that today. B.K. Borison, your writing is magic. It's so fun to get to watch somebody's skill as a writer develop, especially in a 4-book series. From book 1 to book 4, you are gonna watch them develop. It is really cool. I think that I feel so lucky when I find a series that has all the books already out, or at least a bunch of them that I get to do that with. And so I experienced that a lot, especially starting at book 4 and then going back to book 1, and especially analyzing her romantic, like spicy scenes, watching her kind of, I don't know, work out what she likes writing, her comfort level with writing spice, her comfort level like being descriptive with her words. By the end of the series, the spice in book 4, Business Casual, might be some of my favorite romantic scenes I've ever read. It's just honest and it is so sweet. It's beautiful. It's art. I love this series so much. If I could reset my brain and reread this series all over again, I would. But I do want to talk about which ones were my favorite and how I would rate each one of them in terms of like individual books. So the general idea of this series is Lovelight Farms is a Christmas tree farm. Did I say that right? Yeah, Christmas tree farm. And this woman named Stella buys it and kind of renovates it with all of her friends and her family and the world that B.K. Borison creates. It's like a very small town, Inglewild. It is so dynamic and so rich. It reminds me of Elsie Silver and the way that she writes her small towns, but honestly, even more. It was like watching the show Friends, but reading it in a book series. And all of them were such strong characters that they like effortlessly kind of weaved into each other's lives and into each other's stories. And I love that because I really feel like I get to know the people, and she focuses so much on all of the people. The book Bible of this series must be insane. I had to like remind myself this place was not a real place. Like I was like, oh, I would love to go visit. But it kind of gives like Stars Hollow, and a lot of these tropes in all of the books are either fake dating or friends to lovers. The thing I really appreciate about B.K. Borison is she does not make you wait to watch these two people interact in a kind and loving and fun way, like the two main characters of each of the books. I know so many authors that like, it's obvious what this book is about. I don't want to wait until 75% of the way through the book to watch them interact in a way that either is like, they're both aware that there's feelings. Yet I don't know if that makes sense. I really appreciate about B.K. Borison. It's like the first chapter, they're already friends, they're already in each other's lives in some way. And you get to like watch positive interactions between these people. The dialogue that she writes is very witty. Oh my God, the spice in this scene. I just am like remembering it now that we're talking about it. Oh, I got a text, sorry, that distracted me. My friend's eating pizza and he's excited about it. And I'm excited for him because pizza's great. Enjoy your pizza! Okay, sorry. Oh yes, she talks about ADHD. So in all of these books, there is a clear underlying neurodivergence of some kind, either in one character or in both. I'm sensing a little bit of like autism in there personally, seeing that reflected in a book, especially like any neurodivergence at all. And especially when the author doesn't feel the need to like specifically name it and call it out. Like it could just be a part of someone's personality, because not everybody is out here like getting diagnosed, right? Like some people just get auditorily like overstimulated and they don't know why, they just do. There's a lot of that within these books that make me feel so seen and so loved. Let's just spend this whole video talking about these 4 books. Can we do that? Great. Okay, so I rated this an 8.5. Book 2, In the Weeds. This was my least favorite book in the entire series. I rated this a 6.5, only because this was the 3rd book I had read so far. After reading the 4th book in the series first, it was really, I mean, it was a 10. Number 4 for me was a 10. So it's like everything else was kind of being compared to that, which is a bummer of starting at the end of a series, but that's just how it goes. I still would read it again. I would still recommend it in the series. It's just, it was my least favorite of the series. The 3rd book, Mixed Signals, I rated this a 9. So close to where we got at Business Casual, which was a 10. So it kind of went like this for me. I could sit here and say a million more things about this, but I won't, because I want you to read it. And if I say anything more, this whole video is just going to become a B.K. Borison love fest, and it deserves to be, but we'll do that another time. We still have a lot more books to get to. I'm hitting through this shirt already. Oh my God. It's not even that hot in here. I just sweat when I talk. I don't even have to be moving. I'm just talking and my body's like, are you sure you don't need to cool down? You're doing a lot. You're doing a lot and feeling a lot and thinking a lot. Do you need me to perspire for you so you can chill out a bit? Not really. Thank you though. You can stop. I don't need that right now. Thank you. Anyways, sorry. Next is book 2 of the Rose Hill series, Wild Eyes. It is Elsie Silver's 2nd book in the Rose Hill series. The first one was Wild Love, which I was obsessed with. I would not shut up about this book when I finished reading it. I couldn't like wait to read oh, siren. There is a nursing home very close to here. We hear a lot of sirens. Most of the time though, I will say they are just false alarms. Someone got out. So back to Wild Eyes. It's such a bummer to say, but I was a little bit disappointed. So I rated this a 7 out of 10. Number 1, I took a half a point off for the plot. It was just lacking for me. One of the main characters was Rosie in this one, and she has a brother named West. I was actually very pleased with Weston's character in this book. Where it fell flat for me was Skylar. So Weston was such a rich character, and he was so dynamic, is a healthy and strong and capable parent that doesn't on his ex-wife. He never speaks ill of her. He doesn't make her the bad guy and he's this like victim that's left all alone, like helpless, trying to take care of his 2 kids. Like he is a capable human being that has decided to be the absolute best father and parent to his kids and give them everything he possibly can, and not make his kids be put into this situation where they have to spend the rest of their life feeling like they're choosing between 2 parents that made a decision for them that they had no control over. West and his family and that dynamic made this whole book for me. On the flip side of that, I think Skylar was pretty one-dimensional. I think she was super out of touch with reality. She was like this famous pop star. She lived a very privileged life and probably had a lot of different experiences than most people, because I think she was born into that privilege. But it was like she was from outer space. Like simple things she had no idea how to do. Really unrealistic. For how grounded of a character West was, and not grounded in terms of like these people are opposite people, that this difference is being highlighted between 2 people that are polar opposites. West just felt so complete And then Skylar didn't. And I think because West was written out so well, Skylar just seemed like razor thin to me. And the last third of this book lost me. Kind of lost me. I think that some of the resolve that happens in the latter half of this book made no sense to me and felt like a completely different book. I don't know. It really felt like this was two separate books in one. And I really struggled with that because this was so good. This is one of my favorite books I read all year. Like, this is definitely top 10. I think I just expected that from Wild Eyes and I didn't get it. And so I think that's why I was let down. The bar was set so high with Wild Love. If Skylar would have been built out a little better and had a little bit more to her and would have been a little bit more grounded in reality, and if there would have been more conflict between her and West, because a lot of the conflict has nothing to do with him at all, I feel like there needed to be more tension there. The family dynamic here, it's just like, that's really what made it for me. And if you read Wild Love, you have to read Wild Eyes. You probably already have. So this isn't like a don't read it. It's just, you have to compare them to each other in the series, and unfortunately, yeah, this one just kind of fell flat for me. I would rate The Spice as a 4.25. I've been marking on the bottom of the page, like on the bottom of the books, where each of like the spice happens so that I can kind of refer to it when I'm wondering whether I should suggest a book to somebody, because then I can quickly just kind of like turn to the spice and be like, how comfortable are you with this? So it's a great system, but I don't do it every time and I wish I did. Oh yeah, it's very spicy. Yeah, 4.25. Oh yeah. Yep. Classic Elsie Silver here. 7 out of 10 for me. Would recommend, definitely if you've read the first book in the series. If this was a standalone book, I don't know if I would recommend it, if I'm gonna be completely honest with you. And that hurts to say because I am a big fan of Elsie Silver. I'm trying to be as honest as I possibly can. Let's move on now. The rainy day outside is like kind of making me sleepy. Wake up. Wake up. Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. So this is probably what you came to this entire video for, is my thoughts so far on the ACOTAR series. I don't know if that's how you exactly say it. I've been saying ACOTAR because that feels right when you see it spelled out, A-C-O-T-A-R. Did I do that right? Yes, I did. Good job, Elise. Thank you, Elise. Right now, I'm currently on book 3, but we're not going to be reviewing that because I haven't finished it. I'm going to be so for real with you right now. I don't like this series. I definitely didn't like this book. And the reason I'm getting into it, even though I would say don't read it, is because it is so popular and I don't understand why. This was a lot. It was a 6 out of 10. I'd put The Spice at a 3. When there's so much world being built, you can lose a little bit of richness in terms of the actual words being written. It can be like this trade-off of like, wow, this world is rich, but the actual text is not. I think I would have loved it more if the writing would have been a little bit more beautiful, like stuck with me more. I think I just was so focused on trying to understand what the was happening, and also trying to not get traumatized by how much gore there was in this book. I didn't even really notice the writing style, which to me says something. Like, I want to notice that. I want to be blown away by word choices and sentence structures and like imagery, not just how crazy of a thing can we write and how many times can we stack all of that on top of each other until you've got a 630-page book. Half a point off for pacing. Honestly, 0 points for pacing. At the end, I was like, someone put me out of my misery. Please end this for me. I want this book done. I cannot read anymore about mangled bodies, please. What's nice is there's a lot less of that in the second book. Not none, more than I want, but much less than this. I had nightmares after reading this. I had to force myself because everybody was like, keep reading it. This is like the penance you have to pay in the ACOTAR world. We need to stop saying that about this book. It makes me mad that the whole first book of a series, the general consensus is you just have to get through it. 420-page book just to get to this one that's over 630 something pages? What? That's a poorly written series. You need to comment down, Elise. Not one time did I ever have anybody tell me, hey girl, you could probably just skip that whole first book, because it picks back up in this book. I get the gist. I need to be kinder about this. I need to be kinder about this because I know that this author is amazing, and I know that her books are so beloved, and I don't want to shit on something because I didn't like it or understand it. I don't want to shit on the idea of this book. We should just start here. I feel very strongly about this. Maybe that's not correct because there is a lot of world building that happens in this book. The spice, not that spicy. I saw like a lot of pastors' wives like reading these books. So maybe because they're kind of sneakily reading this when they feel like they shouldn't be, even though you can read anything you want, girl. I don't know why we have to be hiding the fact that we're reading romance novels. I don't know if that is why these books in my mind were painted to me as like being the most like sexually explicit book I could ever read. And that's just not the case. If you're reading this whole series for the spice, skip it. If that's the only reason you're reading this series, skip it. If you love fantasy, that's a different conversation. I am not a fantasy reader. I think that in the same way that I really enjoy like mockumentaries or single camera like docu-style sitcoms like The Office or Parks and Recreation, whatever part of my brain that is fed in terms of like entertainment, that same part of my brain craves stories based in reality. The further a story and a world gets out of like reality, my brain kind of shuts off. Shuts off is the wrong way to say it. It stresses me out. It's not relaxing. I'm not enjoying it. I'm working so hard to piece together the puzzle of this book to keep track of all of the moving parts. The world Sarah J. Maas like has created in Prythian and all of these kingdoms and the lords and the high lords and the courts like is so wild. Just in that front alone, it's worthy of praise. I understand. But, and this is where personal preference in like reading is really gonna start to kind of kick in here in this review. I personally don't find myself able to enjoy and relax and unwind and get lost in that story because I'm working so hard at trying to understand and place myself in the correct spot in this story because there's so much happening. So then when we picked back up A Court of Mist and Fury, this was also a 6, but for different reasons. I like him, he's great, but he was not enough to make this book something I would choose over other books. Now, the spice in this book, I'm a happy meatball. That's not what I meant to say. It made me happy. I would say the spice is a 3.5. I think that this book redeemed my experience with the first book and made me pick up the third. I think I was able to follow along what was happening in this book because there was less information being like thrown at me. I understand the world had to be built in the first book. It was like sometimes it was like I didn't need to and will never need to know this about this world because it was like never referenced again. This book felt like there was a lot less, probably because a lot of that work was done in this book, but I don't think that it had to be distributed that way. Give me less information so that I can focus on what I'm getting and really remember it. That was my feeling this whole series. This was a much more enjoyable experience. I enjoyed this more. Like I felt happier, a little bit happier reading it. I didn't feel as depressed. I didn't feel as angry. Half a point off for writing style. It wasn't anything that I wanted to take a little tab. Like, ugh, I just want to remember this sentence forever. 0 for pacing, slow, long. Because this didn't need to be this long. Not even a little bit. Man, I feel like I'm just gonna get eaten alive by people like this series. I don't even want to post this at this point. I am second guessing this entire review of this series. I don't want people to hate me. Not everybody is gonna like everything that they read, and I think that we should have conversations about it, especially when it's so present on the internet and in like book world and book talk and booktube and book Instagram and all of that. Like I felt a lot of peer pressure in this series and I'm trying to undo a little bit of that with my review. I think that the first time that they are physically intimate with each other, I have reread that series that scene so many times. I just had it in my ears walking around the city with it when that came on and, sorry, it was like a little floaty. I ended up reading the first half of the book and then listening to the second half of the book on Audible. So that's why I'm kind of switching between reading and listening. I wasn't ready for it. Because book 1 was so bad in terms of the spice, I really wasn't ready. It was good. In terms of that, I appreciate that. You had to wait so long for anything happy to happen in this series. Chapter 55, I need to like, I just sound angry right now. I do this when I'm excited and passionate about something, I end up sounding very angry. I feel really distraught by this series. I can't talk anymore about the series, or I think I'm gonna really work myself up and like have a panic attack or something. My heart is beating very fast and I am frustrated. So anyways, that's that. Now we are breaking away from any book that is in a series, and all of these books now from here forward are gonna be just standalone books. And we're gonna start with one of my favorite books that I've read the whole year, Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. This book has such a special place in my heart for so many reasons. I think this was one of the first rom-coms that felt so real I forgot it was fiction. There were so many times I really thought I was reading like a non-fiction. I like marked this book up so much. When I was reading, there were so many times when I was reading this book that I thought I was like reading someone's like non-fictional short story, and everything about this book is perfect. It's a 10 out of 10. It's perfect. I would put The Spice at a 3, like honestly 2.9, because there's an open door scene. I would say 3. This is not a book that you read for spice. This is a beautiful movie with a sex scene in it, necessary and important for the story. Sometimes contemporary romance novels can be written just for the spice, for the writing of it and for the enjoyment and the reading of it, and then a story kind of gets woven in. This is not that. This story is so good, so powerful, so moving. This book is about a female writer at SNL, and she meets one of the musical guests, and it's about their story. It's not like a straightforward like love story, and I'm not gonna really say much about it because it's such a beautiful story and I don't want to spoil any of it, but like the background you learn from her as an SNL writer, like my whole body vibrating with excitement because that made the whole book for me, and like nothing had even happened yet. I just am like, tell me more about this process of like behind the scenes at SNL. Already, I was like, I love this book so much. But then the emotional depths that she like makes you crawl into and then crawl out of, oh my gosh, this book will always have a piece of my heart. Always. If anyone is ever trying to get into reading romance, I will tell them to start with this. I love this book so much. Like the first bit just walks you through like a weekly schedule of what it's like to be a writer at SNL. It's so cool. It's so cool. I still often recalled an observation made by a writer named Elise. That's not why I tabbed this, but very cool. With whom I'd overlapped for my first 2 years, which was that when we non-famous people talked to famous people, we wanted the encounter to be finished as soon as possible so that we could go describe it to our non-famous friends. That feels like magical writing. I love that she can take things that feel so universal, but something that you would never think to say out loud or think to put words to. You feel it, you would never know how to explain that to somebody. And she does that like on every page. She has this way of putting like the human experience into such simple words that you're like, are you reading my mind? She's so talented. 10 out of 10. I think everybody should read it. It's so good. And it's not, and for people that are sensitive to spice, this is a great, great, great book. That's my review of this book. Okay, let's keep going. Another one of my favorites was A Knight in Shining Armor by Jade Duveraux. This book for me got a 9.5 out of 10. I would put The Spice at like a 3.25. Given the cover, when you look at this cover, I classify this as like a Fabio on the cover with like the open shirt and like the waxed chest and like the long blonde hair like blowing in the wind on the beach at sunset on a horse. Not what this book is at all, but the cover does not help you in any way form an actual picture of what this book should be. This was recommended to me in my YouTube comments, one of the last book reviews I did, and a more mature reader, to this day, she said this is still one of her favorite romance novels she's ever read. And I'm like, I trust you with my life, absolutely. I'm gonna go buy that book right now, because if you feel that way, I wanna feel that way about this book. And as soon as I bought it, I struggled to open the book because of the cover. I almost ripped the cover off. It just put my head in a brain space of what this book would be, and it wasn't this at all. I'm gonna share a little synopsis of the overview of this story, and I need you to stick with me, okay? As somebody that just went on an absolute rant saying I need to read things that are based in reality, this is gonna sound a little silly. The beginning of this book, essentially, and this whole book, is this girl something happens and she ends up crying at the feet of this statue, like at this church, armor of this knight, and she's like crying, and he just comes to life. He's just alive. She doesn't believe him that like he's who he says he is, and he's like, I just need you to help me get home. He doesn't understand where he is. He just gets plopped into like the 21st century, and he thinks that she's like a witch because he's like, what have you done? You've like summoned me here. I don't know where I am. Why aren't people wearing regular clothes? She's like, are you with me? What is going on? You get to the point where you forget about the whole him being a knight thing. It's just this wonderful story. It becomes more of like a historical piece of literature than it does this like fantasy of this like knight in shining armor that like came back to life. You start to kind of gaslight yourself to be like, is this impossible or could this actually happen? It is so sweet and it's so wonderful and it's an incredible story. Also, it's very informative. Man, history, I always failed history in school, but I feel like the way this was written made me want to go back and learn more about like European history because, I mean, imagine like this person that like a tour of this historical landmark is about, that person is on the tour and he's like pointing out all the reasons why the person that's like giving, like the tour guide giving these facts to these people is wrong. And she's like, no, I'm not. And he's like,
that's literally me you're talking about.
Like, you are so wrong. And it's so funny. Oops, sorry. It's really funny and it's also really sweet and really smart. To her relief, she could see the men believed her, but probably only because they wanted to. I could have lived in this book forever. Like, and I will say, I am a very excitable and very emotional and very empathetic person. Me crying to a high emotion scene in a book is not unusual. That happens often. That happens when the book isn't even emotional and it just catches something in me and it like snags and I'm like, that's fine. I will say this book, finished the book, put it down, and then sobbed. Like for real sobbed. The ending of this is perfect. This book broke my heart and then put it back together and then shattered it again in the best way. And when I put it down, I sobbed really, really hard. There could have been so many ways this book ended, and I'm sure all of them would have been fine, but she picked the best and right one. The very most right one. No notes. That's not true. Okay, perfect, except for I took a half a point off for pacing. You'll feel it when you get to a point of this book where things kind of start to shift. There was one part where my mind as the reader kind of got taken out of the story for a little bit and it was hard for me to get back into the story, but that's my only issue, and it was only because of the structure of how the story was laid out. But I got right back into it. Definitely like top 10 of this year. Absolutely would recommend this book. Please read it. This is one of my favorites. Oh, I love you. This is good. I need to get up and walk around. My legs are starting to fall asleep. It's so dark outside. Do you like my sweats? They're very comfy. I like them too. Thank you for saying yes. I think that's actually probably a good place to stop for today. This took way longer than I expected it to. I'll see you in the morning. Bye. We're back. Hello. It's the next day. We're gonna keep reviewing some books. I found out just now that there's no coffee at my office. I would go across the street to the Dunkin' Donuts and get a coffee, but I just don't feel like interacting with anybody today. And I also don't feel like getting it delivered to my house, one single black coffee from across the street. I'm just not gonna drink coffee. Honestly, that seems like the most logical solution to all of this. There we go. Oh, I was gonna drink my water, but I don't have my water. Water is great too. Just like coffee. Every once in a while, I look at myself in the camera and I'm like, holy shit, I look like my brother. Which makes sense because we share DNA and we're siblings, so that makes sense. All right, we're gonna keep going with these books. Next book we're gonna do is Funny You Should Ask by Elissa Sussman. I just finished reading this. I feel similarly about this book as I do romantic comedy. They should be side by side, sold in bookstores together. Honestly, it should be required reading one and the other. The way that Elissa Sussman writes this story between these two characters is so beautiful and it feels so real. Again, I felt like when I was reading it, I was more reading somebody's journal entries about their life, like their real life. I rated this a 9 out of 10. I took a half a point off for pacing just because of the format of this book. It flips back and forth between different timelines, like now and then back then. I struggle with that. That's just a preference as a reader. I don't do well when timelines are kind of messed up a little bit and you kind of go forward and then backward. So that, for me, it kind of snags a little bit in my mind and I have to kind of get over that. So that was that. And I took a half a point off for the ending. I do love the ending, but the emotional journey that this book took me on, I felt like I needed more from it. I don't know what to say without giving away too much, but it just, yeah, I needed a little bit more. There's so many high highs and so many low lows in this book that the ending didn't match that. I'm not gonna spoil this book for you. I love this book so much. I will say, content warning wise, there is a lot of mention of like alcohol abuse and alcoholism and rehab and all of that. It's an integral part of the story. So if that is something that would be like triggering to you, I would maybe avoid this book. But other than that, it was absolutely essential to the story and it was handled incredibly well. Look how beautiful this cover is. I love this cover so much. Oh, I'm obsessed with it. The cover and the blurb on the back do not match the story inside. This is not the vibe of the story at all. Also, the way that the back is written. Enjoy the cover and love it. I could blow it up and put it on my wall and make wallpaper out of it. I'm obsessed with it that much. And then reset your brain and don't expect this vibe in here, because it's not. But I don't even care because I love the cover that much. You know when you like look at something and you're like, I wish I made this. I wish so badly that that had come from my brain because I want to like own it. You know what I mean? That's how I feel about this cover. Fun fact, I got this book at a bar in New York. I think it's called the Book Nook. Wait, hold please. It's called the Book Club Bar, I think. This looks like where I was. Sorry. It's in the East Village and you walk in and it's like this bar. There's also a bookstore attached to the back and people are just walking around with these drinks, looking at books. It's also a coffee shop. So in the morning you can go and get a coffee or you can get like an espresso martini in the middle of the day and just like walk around looking at books and reading and sitting and I'm telling you, when I picked this book up, two people were flirting so cutely, both with their little drinks right in front of the romance section, clearly just meeting for the first time. And I'm sitting here like, I think this is the best day of my life. The fact that that place even exists, like, is so crazy. You just get to walk in and drink alcohol and talk to people about books and everyone's there to like chill and hang out and meet people. And I got to watch two people like flirt so cute and they were just like getting to know each other and it was like the vibe was there, the spark was there. I just wanted to like walk up and kind of push them a little closer together and be like, you guys look great. like a mom, just like, come on guys, let me take a picture of you guys. You guys are so cute. Oh my gosh. And so I was like, I have to get a book. And I'm so glad I did. I read half of it on the plane ride home. It was a very quick read. Not quick in terms of like, it's not incredibly well written. It is very well written. I just learned online that when you say, this was great, this was a quick read, that's like offensive to authors. When I say it, I mean, I loved it so much that I wanted to consume all of it as quickly as I possibly could. And I didn't do anything else. I only started the book and read the book until it was done. I didn't eat, I didn't pee, I didn't want to work, I didn't want to sleep. All I wanted to do was read this book. That's what I mean when I say quick read. And I think that more people mean it the way I mean it. That was a tangent. Her writing style is so honest. I keep saying the word honest, but I'm trying to think of another word for it. Plain is not the right word because plain sounds like it's boring. Kind of in the way I was talking about with Curtis Sittenfeld. Sometimes an author will say something that does feel like they're reading your mind and kind of lifting a thought out of your head. And the thoughts you think in your head are not always like the most profound things that are ever gonna happen in your brain. Sometimes they're very simple. They're very simply worded. Some authors overwrite and they are just trying to sound as smart as they possibly can. And some authors have a more simple, stripped back, straightforward like way of writing. And I really connect with those kinds of writers. Elissa Sussman is one of those writers. Let me find a good example of this. Well, that one's not appropriate. Yeah, I just really, really appreciate her writing style. If you're a writer, you're gonna love this book. If you're not a writer, you're also gonna love it. In terms of the spice, I would put it at a solid 3, but if I could, I would make it like a 2.75. This is another kind of one of those books, just like romantic comedy. Sorry, I keep comparing it to that because they feel like they are birthed from the same kind of subgenre of romance novels where it's like, it's more of a movie that has a sex scene in it than it is about the sex. The language is very muted, very mild. It's not explicit. I mean, it's explicitly detailing a sexual encounter, but it's like, I think there's like only one scene and also it is very roundabout. And so if you're sensitive to spice, This is definitely a book that you could read and feel comfortable mentally and physically and emotionally. You'd feel safe reading this, I think. Great book, 9 out of 10. Definitely would recommend. One of my favorite reads of the year. We're moving on to a book that I did not think would be such an important conversation for this video, but it has become one in my mind, and I want to have it with you. So it's A Holly Jolly Ever After by Julie Murphy and Sierra Simone. Co-authors. I always find it interesting when there's co-authors. I am so bad at like co-anything. I don't know how people do it. I just think that that's so impressive that you could be like, yeah, I'll write some, you write some, and we'll work on it together. That to me feels like so scary, very scary. I have so many thoughts on this book. First of all, I rated this a 9 out of 10. None of what I'm gonna say is about to make sense, and I need you to trust me. Stick with me, please. I took a half a point off for plot because that's one of my biggest issues with this book. I took a quarter of a point off for characters because I could have done with more of both of them. I think for what the book was, it made sense, but I think for what the story was in underlining the Christmasness of this, I would have loved to have seen more from Callum. And then I took a quarter of a point off for pacing, about 75% of the way through the book, where I was like, okay, I need us to fast forward a little bit, just a little bit. So that's my rating. Spice, 4.9. A Holly Jolly Ever After. In no way did I see this cover and I'm like, this is gonna be one of the spiciest books. So my initial first impressions, there is a prologue in this book that makes absolutely no sense, and I don't know why it was included. It almost deterred me from reading the book. If you're gonna read this, I would say skip the prologue. Man, just the thoughts of what I'm about to say are really stressing me out. The premise of this book is Winnie Baker grew up in this hyper-religious, purity culture, mega pastors of this church that are like famous on these networks, and she grew up basically being this like poster child of purity. This girl got famous so early and was just like never allowed to become the person that she was supposed to be because everyone wanted her to be this like pure, perfect person. And then she just got married really, really early. They get divorced. And that's where the whole book starts, is like she is freshly divorced, freshly out of this like purity culture. She was like shunned by her family because she's divorced. That's like chapter 1 where we're picking up. She's like a Hallmark actor. Hallmark is creating this thing called like Hallmark After Dark. What do they call it? Hope. They call it the Hope Channel. Like they're creating this new sector of the Hope Channel. They're making raunchy movies basically. And because her life has kind of gone to and she's like, I don't know what to do. They're approaching her and being like, do you want to capitalize on this? Like we can do something with this. And so she signs up to be in this movie. The reason this is important, I'm just gonna talk about it. And if it spoils a little bit, that's okay for me. She was married to her husband for 16 years and he never gave her an orgasm. So now she's having to play this part in this movie on screen, faking an orgasm, which she has never had. And it's very clear to everybody that she doesn't know what she's doing, but she's like, I don't know, I can't ask anybody for help. I'm in my 30s. I was married for 16 years. I should know what this feels like. And I'm being so serious right now. I know that this is silly because it's like about a Christmas book. The journey she goes on to try and have her very first orgasm was so endearing and heartbreaking that it made me cry. The frustration that she can't figure it out. She gets advice. She's like looking up on the internet like how to do it. Like it is such a beautifully crafted and important theme in this book. And the reason I'm mad at this book is because like I love it and I'm so angry with it because the Christmasness of it, like the fact that she's filming a Christmas movie and she's supposed to be Santa Claus or she's Mrs. Claus and like a young Mrs. Claus, and then her counter Callum is Mr. Claus, Santa Claus. The fact that there are scenes where like she's having sex with Santa Claus and the language that is around that is too much. I think it undercuts and takes away from the power of what's actually happening in this story. And it almost seems like this book was a book before it became Christmasified and someone's like,
could you just turn that into a Christmas book?
And they're like, sure. But then it just gets muddied with the whole Santa thing. And it sucks. But like, if you can strip all of that away, ignore it, and really focus on what's happening here, just within Winnie herself, her learning that like the moment she has an orgasm, she's not gonna just like a pit of fire isn't gonna like open up below her and she's gonna go straight to hell. The journey that she has to go on, so powerful. I feel so deeply for this Winnie character, and that's why I stuck through the book, because the story that is being told through Winnie's experience in this book, I think is so relatable. I wanna like hug Winnie, and I wanna look her straight in the eyes and be like, you're doing great. You're not a bad person. You deserve to feel good, and you deserve intimacy, and you deserve to feel safe in your body and with somebody else, and you deserve to not feel guilty about it. That alone made this whole book worth it for me. I thought this was a great story. But if I could rewrite this book and take every single bit of Santa out of it, I would. And if I could go and like cleanse my mind of some dialogue, I would. But I will tell you right now, I would still read this again. So I have a lot of mixed feelings and I have no idea if I should recommend this. But if you want to go on this journey with me, it's a great book. You really need to get in the right headspace for this book. It was a 9 out of 10 for a reason. Like, I want to read more of Winnie's story in other books. So if you have suggestions, people that go on this kind of similar journey that Winnie went on in this book, I would love to read those books. That's a Holly Jolly Ever After. Those are all my thoughts. I did not expect this would be the conversation we would be having about it, but here we are. That's the beauty of reading, my guys. Next up, The Graham Effect by Elle Kennedy. This is gonna be a book I'm not gonna review. I read it, I didn't love it. I think that there was a lot happening in this book and it just wasn't my thing. Yeah, I think I just solidified with this book I'm not like a hockey romance reader. It's just not my vibe. I heard rugby is great. Next we're going to our girl Allie Hazelwood, Loathe to Love You. That's my hair. So this is a collection of short stories, 3 short stories that are all kind of woven into each other. And it's all like an enemies to lovers short story trilogy. Very interesting. The 3 in it, the Under One Roof, Stuck With You, and Below Zero. Stuck With You was my favorite of the 3 short stories. I love enemies to lovers. It's so, the line is just so thin between love and hate that it's just, I love it so much. I'm a big enemies to lovers fan. The tension is so good. It's so good when it's done well, and Allie Hazelwood does that very well. Allie Hazelwood's spice is wild. If I want to read something that is like very, very spicy, I love Allie Hazelwood's spice. The spice in this is very confusing to me because it's a short story, enemies to lovers. So naturally, an enemies to lovers short story that's spicy, that's a very difficult path to do successfully. You have to have enough time to build the tension, you have to believe the tension, and then you have to come to a resolve almost that feels like the pacing makes sense. I think that the trope of enemies to lovers and being so spicy doesn't lend itself well to the format of a short story. The only reasons I was really struggling with these, like all 3 of these stories, was there just wasn't enough time to build enough tension to make the release of that tension within the intimate scenes make sense. Especially the first one, it just felt like it came out of nowhere. I've never felt that way about reading Allie Hazelwood. I am obsessed with Allie Hazelwood, and so yeah, I just think that the short story format threw me a little bit. This book is very good. I still love it. I would recommend it, especially if you like Allie Hazelwood, but it wasn't what I was expecting. I also wasn't expecting all 3 stories to have anything to do with each other. I thought they were gonna be completely independent of each other. It's I think 3 short stories with these 3 different friends. And so that was a pleasant surprise. I thought that they'd be more disjointed, and they weren't. So it was almost like, yeah, like a book with 3 parts more than it was 3 separate short stories. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I don't think it was the best Allie Hazelwood book I've ever read. It was great if I wanted to feed my little enemies to lovers heart. Definitely, if you're gonna read any of these 3 from this, read Stuck With You. That one is a good one. That one is a good one. That's what I have to say about that. That is it for romance. And we're gonna kind of transition now into like short stories, nonfiction, or kind of mystery. I don't have a lot in this pool. I don't know why I'm doing so much with my arms, but we're here, so I'm just gonna keep doing it. Now I'm gonna stop. I don't need to narrate any of that, but I just did. Okay, Elise, keep going. We're gonna go into some, stop, stop. We're gonna go into some different genres. I've been waiting to review this book for so long, and I'm so proud that I get to review this book, and I'm so proud that I get to have even read it. So I lost the sleeve, or the jacket of this book. I always lose jackets because I take them off. They kind of stress me out, and so then I always end up losing them, which is unfortunate because it was a beautiful jacket. But this is A Comedy of Nobodies by Baron Ryan. Kill Baron! It's, this is what the cover should look like. It's wonderful. It's perfect. I love it so much. Rated this a 10. I might be biased, and that's okay. I think that this is such a wonderful, wonderful book. This is a fictional book of short stories that are all connected in some way. You do start from the beginning and read to the end. So it reads like a book. There's 9 stories that happen between September and December, and it's all from the same perspective of this guy named Charlie. Baron's writing style is just, his writing is so painfully honest. He's so smart, he's so witty, he's so quiet and calm and peaceful and soothing, and also evokes so much emotion that it sneaks up on you, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I'm feeling a lot. There's one line he wrote that it rocked me a lot. It said, I want to die, but I'm so unlucky that if I were reincarnated, I'd probably just come back as myself. So, like, how do you move on from that after reading that? How do you just go about your day? You know the feeling you get when you're around somebody that is so authentically themselves, it like gives you permission to be yourself? That is what reading this book feels like. It feels like permission to be exactly who you are all of the time, whether that's really good or really bad. But it's like both. It's both ends of the spectrum. This book is very self-aware, and it makes you feel comfortable in yourself reading it. That's how it feels. I hope you read this and you love it as much as I did. Yeah, 10 out of 10 would recommend. I can't wait to read this again. We're just gonna go straight to the last 2 books, and they are mystery, and they are Agatha Christie. My girl Agatha, I love her very much. First, we're gonna do Murder on the Orient Express. I rated Murder on the Orient Express a 9.5 out of 10, and I just took a half a point off for overall enjoyment, but only because I get a little queasy with like blood. That's to be expected. I'm reading like a murder mystery, but usually Agatha Christie does a pretty good job of not being too scary. It's like it's like mystery. She writes mystery so incredibly that she's literally called the Queen of Mystery. And so this was amazing. I still think that And Then There Were None is my favorite that I've read of hers. I think that by far is like the best one I've read. I really, really love the Hercule
Poirot.
Hercule Poirot. Got it. I really, really love the Hercule Poirot kind of style, where essentially it's like broken down into acts, where you hear the story in one act, he gathers everyone's like testimony of an event, and he gets all these like details, and he asks these questions, and you're just like, why did he do that? And then the more you get to know the Poirot detective, you start to realize like earlier and earlier in these books, like why he had someone write something down or sign their name, like probably to try and see if they're like left-handed or right-handed, or, you know, things like that. So the more you get to know him as a detective, the more fun these books become. And so I really, really liked this book. This basically is like everyone's on this train and somebody dies, and they're just solving the mystery of like who killed this person. And so that's like the whole story. It just takes place on this train. And the setting of it, the way that it's like described, the different points of view in terms of like these people's stories, it's so brilliant. She is so brilliant. She is the Queen of Mystery. Very good. Very, 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 very good. 9.5 out of 10. Definitely would recommend. I also read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and I read that on Kindle, and I don't have my Kindle with me. It's not that I didn't like, I just didn't enjoy as much The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. It was lacking in terms of how many like characters there were. Usually in these kinds of stories, there's usually a lot more characters involved, which kind of makes the acquiring of data and of people's stories and testimonies and comparing points of view, there's usually like more happening there. And there are a good amount of characters in, I keep wanting to say John Ackroyd. It didn't feel the same as the other books. I don't know why. Detective Poirot was not the main like narrator of this book. That really threw me for a loop, because I'm used to more like the voicing being just in like Detective Poirot, and he's like French and he has a very specific way of speaking, and my brain kind of got used to that. It just kind of confused me. He took a back seat in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't laying awake at night wondering how this book was gonna get wrapped up. This guy dies. Obviously it's in the title. Everybody is trying to figure out who killed Roger Ackroyd. The impossibility of it being any of them was, I think, taken from me in that book. I think that it quite easily could have been any of them. Because of that, I lost my drive to keep reading, questioning. I didn't feel like the detective. So the first book I read was Five Little Pigs by her, and that was really good. And then the second I read was And Then There Were None, and that one's my favorite. And then to put more Murder on the Orient Express on that list, it'd probably be the second favorite. And then The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, it just didn't feel like it fit. Maybe I was just in a weird mood when I was reading it. And that is gonna do it for this book review. If we're picking favorites for this review, we're gonna go romantic comedy, A Knight in Shining Armor, business casual, and Murder on the Orient Express. Solid recommendations. Oh, goodbye. Thank you so much for sticking with it on this review. I'm gonna have more to say about the ACOTAR series, so you just hold off on that. I'll make that a separate dedicated video. And things that I have coming up, I'm gonna start the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. I really wanna read that. I also wanna read the entire After series by Anna Todd. I watched the movies on Netflix and loved them so much. They put me in a bit of a funk for a few days, so I will not lie. I think I need to space those out so I don't get a little stressy and depressy. Oh, I'm also reading the Dash and Lily series. If you have any suggestions based on how I've reviewed these books, I have read some of my favorite books ever from suggestions from you guys, and I love it so much. So anyways, that is that, and I hope you had fun, and what a ride